And that's a perfect bonk, I'd say. Maybe 9.9 out of 10, but almost perfect. Welcome back, humans, ladies, and gentle cars, whatever you want to call yourself. We are back for Qatar Grand Prix, and this is a sort of a re-upload, because algorithm and whatnot. And since the first upload for Qatar track guide, well, nothing much has changed. It's just that I found a bit better setup that fits me better after a preseason race elsewhere. So let's get into the setup real quick and then let's see what the setup really looks like around here in Qatar. So as you already imagine, it's gonna be pretty high downforce around here in Qatar, although it doesn't look like it. But pretty much the rest of the corners from turn 1 onwards up to the last corner, you're gonna need all the downforce you get in the world. And then on the top straight, I mean the pit straight, you're gonna need all the top speed that you can so that you can overtake. But it's important to know that in order for you to have overall pace, you're gonna be having a lot of downforce around here. Now the time trial setup, it's like something like this, 50-44. It's pretty high wings, and you don't even reach top gear, 8th gear in the race. It's gonna be a bit painful on the straights. You're gonna be very slow, and frankly that it's not really beneficial because you're not going to be recharging ERS at all. It's so much consumption around here on ERS. If you have a lot of wing, you may not be able to recover ERS at all. At least with this, you're going to be able to recover some percentage every lap. And then if you are driving well enough, you carry a lot of momentum through these corners, which are all high speed and connected to each other, you're going to be gaining a lot of time. So having some good amount of downforce here is really important. And I'd say don't go any lower than 40 revving. Maybe if you really want to experiment and be brave, you can go down to 38. But your race pace is going to be quite severely affected if you are not able to handle the car in the corners. You can probably go higher, one click higher. That'll be a bit safer. Of course, more downforce means more stability in the corners, and that is always helpful in the race. Alright. And as usual, if you feel it's understeery, you can always increase the front wing. If it's oversteery, you feel the setup is like it slides too much, you can always reduce the front wing, and that should balance out the car. Right, transmission, it's still the same. The reason I'm running 50 in time trial is because it is time trial. There's less grip here, so you have to sort of rotate the car by using the throttle pedal. So when you go lower on the on throttle, as usual, it's going to increase the amount of rotation you get under acceleration, but that's also prone to some amount of oversteer when you are trying to go on throttle. But if it happens, the oversteer happens, it's going to happen early on and you'll be able to catch it. Whereas if you go higher on throttle, it's going to be less oversteering on exit initially, but if you get an oversteer later on in the corner exit phase, it's harder to save the car. Usually that's the trade-off here. 55 or 50, it's usually a good place to run, and then for a race you can run 55 to 60. It's pretty good. Unfortunately, we can't adjust it by increments of 1 in your MFD. You can only do that in your pit and also from the setup screen. Either way, off throttle is the next thing you want to go for. You can always run a bit lower. This gives you a lot more rotation, but remember around here you get a lot of high speed corners, and you're going to be needing the car to be stable when you're off the throttle, right? You're lifting off, you want the car to be stable before you go back on power. This is going to help you quite a bit, and I'd say 53, 54 is sort of the sweet spot around here. You can always go lower or higher. I don't recommend going any higher than 55. 55 is probably the max I'd go. Otherwise, you are adding unnecessary understeer into the car. You're going to be losing a lot of time. Suspension geometry, the usual here. It's minimum camber, minimum toe. Again, there's some wonky setups that you can play around, and you can maybe find a suspension geometry setup that's better, but this is going to give you the least tire wear, at least from the minimal testing that I've done. It's not 100%, but this is definitely a lot more stable to drive and a lot easier to manage the car as well. So definitely go with this. It's easy few tenths around a lap like Qatar, probably 3 tenths or more if you have this right suspension geometry setup. Suspension, this is where I made slight changes here from the first setup. The first setup that I had the same suspension here, 4116, full stiffness on the front because you're going to be needing the car to be very stable around here. on the front this, and then on the rear you can increase it if you need more rotation from the rear. If the car is too slidey, you can reduce it. And remember, if you increase the suspension, rear suspension, you have to decrease the rear ride height in balance. The golden rule is like if you go 4 or 5 clicks low on the suspension, you go down you go up 1 click on the right height. It's the opposite way. So if you go lower here, for example, you go higher on the right height. Conversely, if you go higher on the suspension, let's say you go +5 or +4, you go probably -1 or -2 on the right height to get the same effect. But at the same time, it really depends on what kind of rotation you want. You want the car to rotate more in high speed or low speed. That really comes down to what you want to do. Now I'd say just leave it as it is. You don't want to be touching this too much. If it gets complicated, just play around with the wings, and that should solve all your problems. The other change that I made is the anti-roll bar. So in the old setup, well, not really old setup, the other setup, the alternate setup, I have a 9-1 anti-roll bar with a 33/40 ride height. The reason I've changed it is because I noticed that in the high speed corners, the car is understeering quite a bit. It didn't happen in time trial because there's virtually unlimited grip in time trial, but in a real race situation, when your tire wear kicks in, your front tires are going to wear a lot more around here. And I raised the ride height so that the front of the car doesn't bottom out with the amount of downforce that is carrying into the corners. And to counter that, to give it a bit more turn in, because of increasing ride height, it sort of creates understeer as well a little bit. So just to get the car turned in a lot more in the mid corner to exit pace, I've reduced the anti-roll bar. 4 or 5 is really the sweet spot around here. 3 is also possible. You get a lot more rotation on entry, but on exit might be a bit slidey. So this is the only change actually that I've done to the entire setup pretty much. So yeah, take it as you will. Brakes, 100% brake pressure. In qualifying, you can run 50% brake bias in every other corner except maybe the slowest corner. You probably have to go up to 53 or 54. I prefer just to run it at 55 the entire race if it's a race condition. Except for like braking into turn 1, you can always go down to 54. It doesn't matter as well. 55 will be pretty stable to use at the end of the day. And yeah, you just adjust it as you need. Tire pressures is another interesting one. The default was 2 clicks on the front and then minimum on the rear. This is okay for qualifying and also in a race, but however I noticed that during my race, at least the way I drove it, I was quite hard on it. I was pushing quite a bit, right? And even after a lot of pushing, the tires did not heat up. So I went back after that and made another test and tested out with half psi more. It actually made the tires to be in the right temperature range. Now if you want to find out what are the right temperature range, of course, if you want to find it out from my channel, sure, just join my Discord. Probably we have a setup board and all the tire data, all the race data that you need for a specific track. You'll probably be amazed how shitty of a job I've done setting up the board, but it's a work in progress, so I invite you to join and take a look at those. So there you go, the setup for Qatar V2 setup. You even may call it 47/40 wings, and it's pretty low here. It's the lowest I'd go, nothing lower than this. And oh yeah, important tip as well, while you're driving out on track, if you feel the car starts to be a little more wobbly, in the pit lane, once you pit, you can drop your front wing by 1 click. That should give you a lot more stability when you go on to a next set of tires with lower fuel. And usually if I go to a soft tires at the end, let's say there's a safety car, I'll reduce the front wing even more because softs have a lot more front grip as well. There you go. And then transmission is 50/55, 50/54. In the race you can use 55/54 or 60/54. Remember, when you go high on the on throttle, it's generating a bit more understeer on exit. Similar suspension geometry, right or left. 41/16 suspension, 4-1 anti-roll bar. If you feel the car is a bit wobbly, you can also probably try increasing the front anti-roll bar 1 or 2 clicks. That should help you. And front ride height, leave it as it is. Seems to be the sweet spot here. Any lower, it start to bottom out. Any higher, you start to lose performance in the car. And brakes, whatever you want to use for your brake bias. And tire pressures, 7 click on the front, 5 click on the rear. Seems to be pretty nice if you're using a hard medium strategy in the race. There you go. So thank you for tuning in. As always, Leave a like if you love this, like this, whatever you want to do with this. Maybe you can subscribe as well. And now we will head on to the track guide. So once again, thank you as always, and let's jump till the end and ride on board with our best lap and see how we can, take a lap around Qatar, which is going to be happening really soon in real life as well. Now, we didn't really get to show you the exit out of the last corner here, so oops, excuse me. Let's go again. Alright, so the starting line is pretty far ahead here. The second Qatar board right around here, so it's quite far ahead. So it's not really important to get a perfect exit out of the last corner if you're starting your lap, because the first turn comes up pretty quickly. Nevertheless, it's always helpful to gain that few more thousands if you get a better exit out of the last corner. So make sure you stay tight to the left hand side around here. Now let's just wrong wheel, and you can see into turn 1 you want to mount the curb as much as you can here. So initially you don't want to mount fully. You can go on the painted Qatar colors here, the purple and white curbs here, and as soon as you reach 100 meters, that's where you want to push your car a little bit more to the left, so you open up the entry into turn 1, the right hander. So if you do this much earlier on behind here, you're going to bottom out the car and it's actually going to slow down the car. You want that to be happening at the braking zone, so it helps you to slow down in a way, and it also helps you to open up the entry into the next corner. So heavy braking zone here, probably the heaviest braking zone here, but not too long as well. You want to be temporarily on the brakes until 50-meter board, and then take this in 4th gear in the race. In qualifying, you can take this in 5th, whichever you prefer. Stay tight on the entry because the track is a little bit cambered inwards, so it helps to rotate the car and power out early as well. So as soon as you're already here, apply throttle about more than 50%, 60-70% even, because you have so much downforce, and let the car run wide. Open up the steering. If you're turning right, start to unwind, start to bring it back to the middle or to the left a bit more even, and then let the car run wide. Use the exit curb if you have to, and then bring the car over to the right again very quickly. And then as you hit this 50-meter mark or this white line, the 50-meter board, it's probably going to get destroyed in some moment of on the weekend, so you might as well use the white line as your reference or the start of the curb. And brake in a straight line, just dab the brakes, downshift to 5th. In the race you can downshift to 4th even to get extra turn in. And then you want to take a very late apex around here, and you can sort of mount the inside curb here without touching the sausage, but I find it to be a bit unsettling for my car. So you want to make sure you are pointing inwards into this apex here, and then this is very technical. Pretty much this whole track, you have to be very precise with your inputs. It's going to take a lot of time, a lot of practice to nail it. Either way, make sure you are almost full throttle here. By this time you're almost full throttle in qualifying, or should be full throttle already, and you're still turning and accelerating. Use all the exit that you can here to make sure you gain time on the entry of the exit of the previous corner, and then stay tight here. It gains you a few good thousands here, maybe even few hundreds. So you want to stay tight here on the right hand side without touching the sausages, of course, otherwise it's going to unsettle the car a little bit. And then bring the car back to the left hand side, and this is quite a fast double right-hander coming up around here, so it's important to set up the entry once again, and you'll get a better exit if you nail the entry right. So at the 50-meter mark, as you pass the white line on the left hand side, that's where you want to brake, and then you can downshift to 6th or even 5th, and then stay very tight to the entry here. I don't like to touch the AstroTurf, of course. This is probably as much as you could take the curb here. Stay tight on the curb and let the car run wide again. As you can see, you have to play around with the track limits here, otherwise you're not going to gain any lap time. You can't be a chicken around here, right? So once your car is sort of straight, and then immediately it's straight for a moment, and then immediately you have to flick right, and ideally you want to be tighter into the corner here. I missed the apex a little bit. You see I could be a bit more tighter to the right, but again, time trial, don't really feel like it's the best grip conditions here. and let the car run wide on the exit again. Use the track limits here. We could have used it a bit more. I was a bit conservative, but it can gain you a few thousand if you nail it correctly. And then into the next part here. This is the only part of the track where I'll recommend you using a bit higher brake bias. Probably 55 in the race, and everywhere else you can use 54, 53 even. And you want to be braking right at the 50-meter mark here, and you can brake on the AstroTurf onto the curb here to open up the entry, open up the exit of the slow corner here. So third gear, and then take a late-ish apex. You can be tighter and have an early apex and exit earlier, whichever you prefer. And then use the exit again to make sure you are accelerating and turning at the same time. You're maximizing your exit. And then use the curbs here. Bring back the car back to the left-hand side, and you're going to prepare for another slow-ish corner here, a medium speed complex here. So it's a right, left, blah blah blah, that kind of corner here. You want to use the 50-meter mark again, but somewhat further ahead. So if you're driving in cockpit, you'll probably have to find a reference, which is there's a pole after this white line. You can use that. If you are in the TV pod, which I'm using, I just use the end of the right hand side curve. It's very tiny on the peripheral vision, but as soon as that goes out of my vision, that's why I brake and then downshift to fourth. A bit of a late apex here because I want to get a straighter exit. It gains a bit of time on the exit and into the next complex of corners. In this attempt, we kind of butchered it a bit, so we didn't really do it perfectly. But either way, you want to make sure the car, you're opening up the steering. As you see, as you're accelerating, I'm unwinding the steering. Open up to the left, let the car run wide, because the amount of downforce you have in these cars is so unbelievable. You can actually just nail this flat out here in qualifying. And use as much of the track as you can. As you can see here, we are almost on the track limits here once again. And there you go. And open up the entry into the next right-hander. This is also sort of a blind right-hander. You have to get a feeling of this when you want to turn in. But wherever you refer to, or if you use racing lines, you want to make sure you mount a lot of the inside so that you enter very tight, which allows you to open up the entry into the next left-hander over here. This is a very fast left-hander. Again, you want to be braking right at the white line or just before that in the race, and then downshift to fourth. Take a lot of the entry curve around here, and this exit is very tight on the exit, and it's very easy to get an invalidation around here. Sometimes you can even run wide and not lose much time, and the game will not invalidate your lap time. So use it to your advantage if you really need to, but don't be too dirty with that. And use all the track limits here. It's a bit difficult to nail this corner in lower downforce because it's quite a high speed corner, but either way, you want to make sure you get a good exit around here, because the time that you gain is going to be carried forward all the way to the last corner from here. You believe it or not, if you lose a little bit of your back end, you have a little bit of oversteer, you're going to be losing all the time to the next 3 fast right-handers and then 1 fast left-hander. You're going to be losing about 2 or 3 tenths easily, and you'll be wondering where you lost your time. It's not set up, it's probably just skill issues. Alright, so bring the car back to the left-hand side. This gains you a few more thousands once again. You can go back to the start of the video and see that actually gains you a few thousands, so which is helpful even in the race. And I'm just riding the curb because it's the shortest path, right? Now this is where the fun begins, right? As Anakin would say, a triple right-hander. This is very technical, but what I mean by technical is you have to be very precise with your inputs, your turning, and this is going to be flat out in qualifying. You're not going to lift even a single percentage for qualifying. In the race, the first 2 parts are pretty much flat. The third part is going to be a slight lift. So let's see how do you do this. Now open up the entry by riding the curb here. As you can see, oops, wrong view. You can see here we are again flirting with the track limits. You can go a bit more to the left, but this is as good as I could do in that attempt. And right after the 50-meter board, that's where I turn in, and then you want to take a lot of this curb here. Again, don't want to touch the AstroTurf or the sausage, but touch a lot of the curb as much as you can. This is pretty much a few millimeters away from using the entire curb width here. and it's going to be flat, so the car is going to be temporarily straight. And again, the turning point for this is sort of a blind one, but while I'm in the car, I use the end of this rumble strip here, right, the tooth curb, the white and the green curb, right after this on the left hand side where my left tire is. So as soon as this ends, this is sort of like in my peripheral vision. As soon as I pass that, plus the muscle memory that I trained with on this track, so once I pass this, that's where I turn the car in. It can be a little bit more tighter to the right on the inside, which is also going to help you to open up the next corner. Yeah, but this is as good as it gets, if you want to take at least half of this curve. This is again flat, and again here it's sort of blind, but it's a bit of a split moment after you hit this the tooth curb once again. And you really want to just flick the car in. If you take a look at the inputs here, you're just flicking the car in and playing with the track limits once again. This is probably the closest I've gone to the track limits on this corner here. It's touching the sausage curb as well, which is kind of dangerous, but with so much speed and pre-safe ride height, you're going to be okay here. It can be risky if the setup is a bit loose, so you want to be careful not to touch that sausage. On the exit, could have used a bit more exit if we were a bit more to the left here. We'll probably be using a lot more on the exit. Once you're done with that, bring your car quickly back to the right hand side, and as soon as you hit this curb, the start of this curb in qualifying, it's just lift, very little lift, and downshift to 6th gear, so you're probably still about 70-60% throttle, and you want to throw the car in. Once you turn the car in, as soon as you can, go back to 100% throttle, let the car run wide on the exit. Again, use all the curb as much as you can here without touching the sausage. If you touch the sausage, it actually unsettles your car, and that's it, your lap is lost. You're going to run wide on the exit. Here again, almost as all the track limits that we're using, you have to do it, otherwise you're not going to gain any lap time. And then immediately bring back to the left hand side here, 50-meter board, brake here, or just after that. In qualifying you can brake a bit later. In the race you'll be braking right around here where the white line is. Down 3 gears to 4th gear, or you can carry your speed in 5th gear. And again, you want to take the entry curb here to open up the exit, and you can accelerate quite early here because the corner opens up quite nicely here, and you accelerate, run wide on the exit. This is a little bit safe again, but you can go wider on the exit, playing with the track limits once again, and stay within the track limits. DRS will be activated around here. In the race, if you're 6/10 or 5/10 behind someone who doesn't have DRS, it's gonna be an easy overtake for you. There you go, a long track guide around Qatar, because, well, quite frankly, it took me even some time to learn the track and get to know how to take certain corners. Hopefully that helped you, and I will see you all in the next video, which is going to be, well, since we're already in Qatar, let's just continue with the Gulf countries. We are going to Bahrain. So see you next time. Take care everyone, stay safe, and goodbye.